Breakups are tough even when you know. They're for the best. I've been trying to keep myself together after splitting up with my boyfriend of 2.5 years. I don't really want to get into it. It wasn't messy or dramatic. We just weren't right for each other anymore, but that didn't make it any easier. Some days it felt like everything reminded me of him. I'd been forcing myself to stick to no contact, telling myself that it was the healthiest way for both of us to move on. It was hard, though, really hard. One of the things I missed most about us was playing pool together. It was our thing. I'm a pretty decent player, definitely better than average, but my ex, he was incredible. On his good days, he could pull off trick shots like it was nothing. One rail, two rail banks kicks. Combinations, I'm pretty sure he was even learning a standard mess we each had. Pool tables at home, but obviously we're young and staying inside every night wasn't exactly ideal. When we did go out, we always made sure that wherever we were going, usually a bar, had some pool tables. We hated crowded bars with long waits for tables and screaming patrons. So the places we went were quieter, usually attracting an older crowd. Dive bars with old scuffed tables and sticky floors were our sweet spot. Obviously, you can't expect to find a regulation table in pristine condition at any bar, but the dive bars were definitely a better shout than rowdy college bars. We were usually the youngest people there, but we didn't care. At that point in our relationship, we had grown somewhat bored of the typical college let's get plastered every night mentality. Plus, even though I'm kind of shy, my ex was pretty charismatic and would get along with anyone. Us not being total newbies, that pool didn't hurt either. A few weeks ago, I found myself missing that part of my life more than usual. It was a random Wednesday, though, so none of my friends were free. I didn't want to sit around the house feeling sorry for myself anymore, so I decided to head out to one of the bars we used to go to. I told myself it wasn't about nostalgia, that I just needed to get out. Believe me, I'm not the type of person, nor do I usually have the confidence to go out myself, but I was feeling some type of way that night. The bar was exactly the same as I remembered: dim lighting, worn-out stools, a jukebox in the corner. The familiarity was comforting, but it also stung. The memories came flooding back, and I almost turned around and left right then, but I forced myself to stay. After grabbing a few drinks, I wandered over to one of the pool tables and started idly chalking a cue. I'm not really sure what I was planning on doing there. Playing alone would have been a little odd. Luckily, my question was answered because a guy walked over. He was maybe in his mid-20s, the only person in the room even close to my age. He leaned against the table and asked if I was up for a game. I nodded and told him to rack him up. He put some money in the slot and started racking the balls. I laughed to myself as he racked them. Wrong, but I didn't say anything. We played a few rounds and I started to relax. He wasn't bad, not as good as my ex, but not terrible. I wasn't going easy on him, though. I won every rack we played. We chatted as we played, and he even bought me a couple of drinks. He was friendly enough, but it quickly became clear he wasn't the brightest guy in the world. I like sharp and quick-witted guys who can hold their own in a conversation. This guy, not so much. Still, I didn't mind it. Felt good to just play and talk and not overthink things. For once, I was having a good time. After the fourth game, he popped the question asking if I wanted to go back to his place. The question caught me off guard, but I guess I couldn't have been too shocked. I froze for a second before shaking my head. I tried to make it playful, saying he'd need a second date for that. In all honesty, I just didn't want to move so quickly. I guess I wouldn't have been totally opposed to taking things further with him, but a random Wednesday night wasn't the time for that. I guess I didn't do a good job turning him down, though, because his entire demeanor changed. His smile dropped, and he literally started scowling at me. I was not prepared for what happened next. He said, "Are you serious?" and grabbed my wrist, saying something about spending all that money on those drinks. Before I could respond, he snatched my purse too. I had never been in a situation like that, so instead of screaming or fighting, I just kind of froze up. Even though we were in a public place, I was still terrified. Luckily, a couple of older guys at the bar noticed what was happening and stepped in. I'm honestly not sure what I would have done had they not. One of them told the guy to let me go. The guy glared at me, muted something under his breath, and threw my purse back onto the table before storming right out of the bar. My heart was still racing, and I thanked those guys profusely for helping me out. That was it for me, though. I called an Uber and left the bar, still kind of shocked and trying to process what had just happened. I decided to close my eyes in the Uber. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember is the Uber driver gently waking me up. We were parked across the street from my house. I thanked him, got out of the car, and started walking toward the door. As I rummaged through my bag for my keys, I impulsively checked my phone for the first time since leaving the bar. That's when I saw it, that God all notification AirTag found moving with you. I nearly dropped my phone. My hand started to shake as I rummaged through my purse, tossing aside my wallet and makeup until my fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. I pulled it out and stared in disbelief. There was literally an AirTag in my bag. A wave of panic hit me, way worse than what I was feeling earlier. I was still standing in the middle of the street, so I threw it on the ground and stopped on it a bunch of times until I was sure it was broken. I fought back a scream and started breathing heavily. The cold wasn't helping. I needed to get inside. I looked around frantically, but the street was completely empty. Whoever had planted the AirTag, probably that guy from the bar, would know exactly where I was maybe not my exact house, but the street for sure. The houses on my street are large and spaced out, so he'd definitely be able to narrow it down. I grabbed my purse and sprinted to the back door, fumbling with the lock. Before finally getting inside, I slammed the door behind me and locked it, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I was safe, but I couldn't stop shaking. I walked up to my room, wondering how I had gotten myself into this mess. Normally I'm asleep by 10 and out cold for 9 or 10 hours, but there was no way I was going to sleep that night. I looked out my bedroom window, thinking maybe the scenery would lull me to sleep or something. As I was looking out the window kind of mindlessly, I noticed an old beat-up Lincoln Drive slowly past my house. Nothing too unusual, but it was kind of late for cars to be driving on a residential road. But then it came back from the opposite direction, and I knew something was wrong. It passed even slower the second time, like the driver was scanning the houses. I didn't want to face the reality of the situation, but when it passed the third time, I had no choice. It was the guy. It had to be. He was trying to find my house. I wanted to scream again. The next time the car passed, the driver's side window was rolled halfway down. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't want that guy to know he was in the right area. I know that doesn't make any sense, but I was so scared and couldn't think straight. The next time the car passed, the driver's hand was hanging out of the window, holding something. It looked like a knife. And then, instead of driving past the car, stopped in the middle of the road right across from my house. I ducked down, my heart beating a million beats a minute. Again, I stayed there, crouched below the window, too terrified to move. By the time I looked up, the car was gone. I waited for what must have been an hour, but it didn't come back. The next morning, I told my parents everything. My dad scolded me for not calling the police, but I told him I was too scared. He called a buddy of his, a police chief, to ask for advice. His friend said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence or the car's plate number, which I hadn't been able to see. His friend told us to call the police immediately should we ever see that car again. I didn't leave the house for days. Even now, I'm really scared that he's waiting somewhere and he's going to see me enter or exit my house again. I haven't seen the car since, though, so maybe the nightmare is over. I don't have the most exciting life, but it's comfortable. I'm 40, single, no kids. Some people might find that depressing, but honestly, I don't mind. I've got a steady job, a decent house, and no one to answer to but myself. I work as a bartender at a high-end luxury rooftop in a neighboring town, catering to the kind of clientele who think regular bars are beneath them. I don't live anywhere near that level of luxury myself. My place is in a pretty middle of Theek neighborhood, about 20 minutes away, but working there has its perks. The tips are amazing. People in that area aren't shy about throwing money around, and the rotating crowd keeps things interesting. Since the bar is upscale, we don't have the typical regulars you find in a dive. I like that. I never quite like how close some customers would get with me, or any other bartender for that matter. Maybe that's just me, though. I like to keep to myself. I should probably mention that my name's Kevin. That'll be important later. It was a Friday night, our busiest night. The place was packed, as usual, with groups of friends clinking glasses, couples on date nights, and a few folks who probably wandered in just to feel important. I always like playing a mental game with my patrons. I tried to figure out which ones are pretending to be something they're not. You can tell a lot about people by the way they order a drink. The ones who ask for complicated cocktails are usually trying to impress someone. The ones who order a whiskey neat, they've had a day. I had my eye on a couple at the end of the bar who were down to their last sips of wine. It's always better to offer a refill before they wave you down. I was in my groove, mixing drinks and chatting with customers when I noticed someone walk in who definitely looked out of place. I clocked the guy immediately. He was clenching his teeth and scowling like he was furious. He had jet black hair that wasn't combed and sat like a bird's nest on his forehead. He was wearing a blank black hoodie under a faded leather jacket, which looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. There were stains all over it, but none of that was as unsettling as his face. Like I said, he just looked so angry. He made a beeline for the bar, but he didn't sit down. He just stood there staring at me. I wondered to myself how he had gotten past the doorman in the lobby. I cleared my throat and asked if I could get him something to drink, trying to keep my tone neutral despite the weird vibe he was giving off. He didn't answer right away, which was strange. He just kept glaring at me like he was getting ready to swing. Finally, he muttered that he wanted a double shot of Jäger. I nodded, grabbed a glass, and poured the shot. Joer isn't a drink we pour often here. Most of our patrons are likely to ask for something a little higher quality, but hey, if someone wants Jäger, I'm not about to question their taste. I set the glass in front of him and moved on to serve a few other patrons. When I came back to charge him, he tossed crumpled cash onto the counter. That also threw me off. Hardly anyone pays in cash at this place again, though it wasn't my place to judge. The guy didn't say anything as I rang him up, and I was ready to move on. When he spoke again, I still remember his exact words. I knew I'd find you here, Kevin. I froze, my eyes snapped to his ass. I scrambled to process what he just said. I put the glass in my hand down and demanded to know how he knew my name. I didn't want to make a scene, so I kept my voice low, but I hoped he got the gist of how serious I was. He didn't answer my question, just stared at me with the same angry intensity. Finally, he said, I know what you did. Before I could ask him what he meant, he turned and walked towards the elevators. I wanted to yell something or chase after him, but I decided against it. I was on the clock. I couldn't just neglect my job. Instead, I just stood there for a moment, completely thrown off. I was honest to God confused out of my mind. I didn't recognize him in the slightest. I couldn't think of anything I had done that would warrant such a cryptic statement. I'm no saint, but I don't go around making enemies. It put me in a sour mood for the rest of the night. When my shift finally ended, I drove home, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened earlier. I racked my brain for literally any explanation that made sense, but couldn't think of any. By the time I ended up going to bed, I was still relatively unsettled by the whole thing. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up randomly. I wasn't really sure what woke me up, as I didn't have to go to the bathroom, and I'm usually the type of person to sleep through the night. I didn't hear or see anything, but something fell off without moving. I kept my eyes open, waiting for them to adjust to the darkness. After about a minute, I saw something that gave me an adrenaline rush of fear. There was a dark mass in the corner of my room next to the door. It was just standing there, but I Was 100% sure it was something that didn't belong in my room. I felt my heart start to race, but I forced myself to stay still, pretending to still be asleep. Someone was in my room. I repeated that thought to myself like 6 times before. Truly processing it, I knew I had to do something. I counted silently to 3. And in one quick motion, I sprung out of bed, screaming like a crazy person. I was prepared for a fight, but the figure didn't come toward me. Instead, he bolted for the door. As he moved, I heard something clattered to the floor. I chased after him through my house, but by the time I reached the front door, it was wide open, and whoever had been in my room was gone. I wanted to run out into the yard to look for him, but I was worried that I'd be walking directly into a trap. Instead, I made what I still think is the smart decision and slammed the door shut and locked it. I thought back to the clatter I had heard earlier. In my room, I walked back to my bedroom, turned on the light, and froze. In the corner of the room, there was a knife just laying there on the floor. It was one of mine, taken from the kitchen. I felt sick. Whoever I had just chased was planning to hurt me, possibly kill me. I called the police right after that, and they quickly arrived and searched both my house and my yard, but found nothing. I gave a description of the man from the bar, and the police got the video footage from my bar, but they haven't been able to find him yet, 'cause I haven't heard anything. The thing that freaks me out the most is that I know for a fact I had locked all my doors that night. I locked them every night during their search, though the police were never able to figure out how that man entered my house. None of the windows were broken or unlocked, and there was no sign of forced entry. To this day, I still have no idea how he got inside. I haven't seen him since, but I would be lying if I said I don't think about this encounter. Music. Often I work as a bartender at a bar and restaurant in a suburb just outside Baltimore. I'll do my best to explain the layout so the story makes sense. It's a busy place with a unique setup. There are no waiters, just bartenders like me and the cooks in the back. If you want to find food or non-alcoholic drinks, you have to order them at the bar, and when everything's ready, you grab it from the counter. I'm not sure why things are done that way, but I guess it had something to do with management being cheap and trying to avoid hiring waiters. Either way, it keeps things fast-paced, which I actually like. For whatever reason, the place is really popular, even though I personally don't think it's anything super special. The atmosphere is lively most nights, with great music, a buzzing crowd, and a standing area near the DJ booth where people gathered to dance and chat. The constant flow of customers and the high-energy vibe make the job fly by. I love meeting and talking to new people, so the gig is perfect for me. I would probably lose my mind if I had to wait long periods of time between serving guests, but that's just me. I bet some people are the opposite. That particular night started off like any other. It was a weekend, so things were going to be super busy. I was ready. After a certain time, the bar started filling up with people. It looked like more of a younger college crowd that night, which meant more dancing, more spilling, and a rowdier environment in general. Oh yeah, and worse tips, which kind of sucked for me. This one group of kids just kept on ordering round after round of tequila shots, faster than I could line up the salt and limes. It's always chaos when they take over the bar. One of them was so plastered he was the same pickup line on me like 3 times. I was running around doing my thing when I noticed an elderly couple walk in and sit down at the booth in the corner of the restaurant. At first glance, there was nothing strange about them. I just thought it was interesting that 2 people that age would want to come into a rowdy place like this. I didn't have too much time to think about it, though, so I went back to work fast forward. Maybe 30 minutes to an hour. I was halfway through pouring a line of gin and tonics when I noticed the couple. Again, my hands kept working, muscle memory taking over, but my brain was stuck on them for some reason. That's when it hit me. They were just sitting there motionlessly. They hadn't ordered anything either. No food and definitely not any drinks. I would have remembered. I looked a little closer and realized that they weren't even looking at each other. They were both fixated at the wall next to them. From what I could tell, it didn't look like they were talking either. It was the strangest thing. I was beyond curious, but the bar was slant, and I had too much to do to spend time wondering about it. I figured they might be waiting for someone or didn't realize how the place worked. Maybe they were waiting for a waiter to take their order. When I finally had a break, I decided to check on them myself. I walked over to the table and put on my most polite smile as I approached. Neither of them turned to face me. They were both still staring at the wall like statues. I cleared my throat and asked them if they wanted anything to eat or drink. The woman didn't even flinch. She kept staring at the wall like I hadn't spoken at all. The man turned his head slowly, like he was moving in slow motion. When his face came into view, I felt a chill run through me. His skin was pale and wrinkled, and his eyes were almost sunken into his face. Completely, he didn't speak, just stared at me and shook his head, once firmly but silently. Something about the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. I muttered something in response and quickly returned to the bar. I had the weirdest feeling in my gut after that. Those people looked like they didn't even belong in the Century, let alone this bar. I didn't look over at that booth for a long time. Eventually, things started to die down a little, and I remembered the couple. I glanced over impulsively, and I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. Both of them were staring directly at me. Now I made direct eye contact with the woman, but she never averted her gaze. I don't think I'd ever been more uncomfortable at my job than I was in that moment. I looked away and pretended to be busy, trying not to freak out completely. By the time I glanced back again, the booth was empty. I was relieved. I was just glad that they were gone. As mean as that sounds, by the end of the night, I was still thinking about the whole thing. As I wiped down the bar and closed up with my coworker Karen, I decided to ask her if she saw anything strange. I guess what you would call a vet. She's been working there for years and prides herself on noticing everything and everyone that comes through the doors. When I asked her about the couple, she gave me a confused look and said she didn't know what I was talking about. I looked at her blankly and told her I was talking about the elderly couple that was sitting in the corner booth. She shook her head and told me she didn't remember seeing anyone like that. She then jokingly asked me if I was hallucinating, which got a playful laugh out of me. But on the inside, though I was losing it, I knew what I had seen. I asked her if she was sure, and she crossed her arms before listing at least 10 random people who had ordered food that night and what they were wearing. I laughed again and complimented her memory, but like I said before I was dying on the inside. By the time we locked up, I started doubting myself. As I walked to my car, I noticed something that made me nearly drop my keys in fear. Across the street, there were two dark figures standing under a lone street light. I knew it was them. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. I didn't wait another second. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the lot without another look. The drive home was awful. I was trying not to break down the whole time. I just kept repeating, "Oh my God," over and over. I had so many questions. Had Karen somehow missed them? Were those people even real? Was I going insane? I couldn't explain it. I thought I was going crazy. I wish this story had a resolved ending, but it doesn't. I never saw those people again. I never got any kind of explanation. I don't think I ever will.